I'll go back to the voter ID thing as well. They're terrified of the voter ID, and you can be as sarcastic as you want to be, but they're terrified of any attempt to reform the political process. And it proves to me that there is no right or left in this country anymore. There's just left. Wow. And there's a tiny group of people who are saying, wait a minute, maybe the federal government's too powerful, maybe the state governments are too powerful, and they are now going to be intimidated using the full strength of the federal government and eventually the state governments. You want to buy the NDAA thing, that's fine. Going after these groups to whittle them down to just the quote-unquote tax protesters and a few people who just will not be cowed. Well, that's what's happening.
And I think for you to say there's just left, that broad brush again, yeah, there are a lot of people who are in elected office, Bob, who don't have the courage to stand up for their convictions, and actually they don't even have the experience to stand up and articulate why we cannot continue to go in this direction. I don't think it's fair, though, to suggest that when, for instance, Republicans, because that's what you're suggesting, stand up and suggest that there are places where we can agree on these issues, that somehow completely eliminates any opportunity for reform. In other words, the fact that we've got a couple of legislators that are agreeing that maybe we should have some electronic system for registered voters, that doesn't take away from the issue. Well, let me finish, because I always do with you. That doesn't stop us, as Mary Kiffmeyer, the representative who carries 21st century voter ID in the House, she said that's an enhancement. You still have to answer the question, do we amend our Constitution to require people to prove they are who they say they are when they exercise the right to vote?
Let me tell you why I think this, because I think what happens is it says here's a voter ID light that you can vote for, and that way it gives you some cover, and then you don't have to vote for the amendment. Wow. That's what I think happens. And now, whether it's intended that way or not, what happens is it enables them to get the amendment off the potential vote, so that because what they've done, and you laughed at me before when I said this, but I believe this, what they are trying to do is demonize people who believe that a photo ID is essential as being racists or against quote-unquote poor people. Now, you can't deny that the writing, the editorials, and some of the stories have been in that direction. And what these guys, I believe, are doing is trying to give themselves cover to not have to vote for the amendment.
Bob, first off, I didn't laugh at you for suggesting that someone out there and entities are trying to demonize those who would suggest that it's a reasonable requirement that somebody prove that they are who they say they are before they vote. Absolutely, they're doing that. What I rolled my eyes at you about is to allege that there are legislators, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, and they just so happen to be that there's more Republicans that support photo ID than Democrats, to suggest that they're all just going to take the easy way out and, they're all so afraid of being demonized, I think is you're dead wrong. Are there some that are? Yeah, there are. And that's been the problem, that you have people that get elected to public office and they all want to be liked. So they're too afraid to do the right thing because God forbid that somebody might disagree with them. On this issue, I'll tell you what, they not only have to pass that ballot initiative and let the people decide whether they want to amend our Minnesota state constitution to require that someone, before they exercise the right to vote, prove that they are who they say they are. They not only have to put that on the ballot, but I see no problem with legislators offering additional reforms.
Guess what?
Like electronic registration of voters.
They're going to go out and they're going to vote for that electronic registration bill, and they're not going to put the amendment on the bill. You wait. That's what's going to happen. And then they're going to say, well, see, we really are for some sort of electronic registration, but it gives them cover to not. And you watch. Don't tell me that they're going to be courageous. We have sat here for at least a year talking about the courageous votes on the budget. And what did they do? They increased the budget by what, $5 billion if you count the backfill on the stimulus. And you're going to tell me that these quote-unquote Republicans are going to be courageous? This is why I say there is no left and right. There's just left, because they don't have the courage to say up and go, I don't care about compromise. Here's the deal. This is wrong. What about the guys that compromise on the National Defense Act thing? Now they can use drones in the United States. They can spy on people and everything else. And who voted for that? Republicans. Because there's enough Republicans that say, well, we have to do it. And there we go. Go ahead. And that's what I'm talking about.
Go ahead.
They're all leftists.
Look back in your rearview mirror and shoot everybody that you see following you in the big SUV that you're driving, Bob, while you suck down all that gas. I'm looking forward
What?
Today is February 29th. I'm looking forward. They're going to be there for several weeks. You're going to get a budget forecast this afternoon. You're right. People make mistakes, but they also can learn from those mistakes. And I'm telling you that there are courageous representatives over there.
You're being far too kind to
Both, you know what? But allow me to do that.
Okay.
Until you can actually tell me when we're all done, when they've given the I move to adjourn sine die and they all go home. Once that happens, if you are sitting on that side of the table and you're telling me, look, they didn't do it and I told you so, if I absolutely have to sit here and agree that you were right and I was wrong, it'll be one of the worst days that I've had at this radio station.
Well, listen, I respect the fact that you're nice to them. But you know what?
You're
being too nice to them. And here's why. Let me just finish. Here's why. The reason is the same thing with the budget. They were supposed to be courageous. What did they do? They ran for cover and they increased the budget. They're going to do the same thing with photo ID. You watch. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I'll be glad to be wrong, and it won't be a bad day. It's just the way it is.
Well, it will be a bad day for me because
they're not conservative.
Tell you what, that has to be passed and let the people decide whether it is a reasonable thing. You make them show a photo ID to get on an airplane. You make them show a photo ID to check out a library book. You make them show a photo ID to cash a check at your local grocery store. There's nothing unreasonable about requiring someone to present a photo ID before they exercise the right to vote. And if there's any Republican who votes against that, you know what? God bless them, but I hope they find something else to do.
Well, there you go. You've just dug the hole. Now you can jump in it.
No, I absolutely believe that, and I can disagree. I can agree to disagree on budget issues all day long, all right? And we can have that disagreement, but you want to put real integrity into your election system, you start requiring people, and I'll tell you what, this is one where we'll disagree, I'm sure, but we should eliminate vouching, and the same-day registration is causing us a huge problem in this. No, I know, but other Republicans can disagree with it. What they cannot disagree with us on is you should have to, it is not unreasonable to prove you are who you say you are before you exercise that right to vote.
And we're going to break, but you keep restating that, and that's okay because we agree on that. I'm telling you, the end is near because they're going to vote for this watered-down version so they don't have to put that amendment in. You watch. And maybe I'm wrong, but you just keep restating the need for photo ID, and we agree 100% on that, as do 80% of Minnesotans. Guess what? You're never going to vote on it in the upcoming election because they're not going to pass it. Let's get a traffic update coming up. John Michelson. Good morning. Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130, Davis and Emmer. Let me just tell you what we're talking about so you know. We've been talking about two different things. One thing that got me hot this morning is this IRS letter that's gone out to Tea Party affiliates all over the country requesting all kinds of information concerning their 501c3 status, meaning they are charitable organizations. You can make contributions and so forth. Now the IRS wants to know everything that they've done. We're done with that. We had on a member of the Tea Party to talk about it. This will be coming up again, I'm sure, in future days. Now we're both upset about the what has happened is that I believe in the Senate they have offered a bill which would digitize, for lack of a better term, the voter rolls. You know, you go in to vote and they have a little piece of paper that has your name and so forth. One of the features of 21st century voter ID is that you would get an ID, you would swipe the ID, we would do away with the voter rolls because this thing would basically check your status, your address, and so forth immediately. This attempt, I believe, to introduce this new bill is an opportunity to essentially water down 21st century voter ID by saying, look, we already have a computerized voting system. All that is digitizing that piece of paper, and it wouldn't do away with vouching. It wouldn't do away with those other pieces of 21st century voter ID, which literally give you a photo ID. You come in, you swipe it, and they know who's voting. They know where you're from, and it would eliminate the need for vouching, for bringing in a bill or anything else, because it would know who you were. And I believe, quite honestly, we need to vote on this an amendment. It's got an 80% support in the state, and it has been offered as an amendment because Governor Dayton is never going to sign such a bill. He already vetoed 21st century voter ID, so it's been offered as an amendment. So now they're offering a watered-down version of it. I don't know why they're offering a watered-down version. It doesn't make any sense to me to do that. Then Tom and I get into an argument because And to his credit, Tom is generally supportive and saying, well, let's try to figure out why they're doing this. And I am dismissive because I believe what has happened in this country is that the rights the Republican desire to compromise overwhelms their principles again and again and again. We are in a situation in this country where the so-called right or conservatives, people who believe in the constitutional republic, are being completely overwhelmed by this desire to compromise. We just want to, because right, it's all about product. It's all about getting things done. It's all about voting. And what ends up happening is you end up spending more. You end up trampling on people. You had a caller talk about that National Defense Act where they're allowed to use the military against the people in this country. What's the reason for this? Are we being attacked by terrorists? You know, did it? I just.
But here's.
I have to ask. Now, I don't want to get off the subject. I mean,
I want to stay on this issue.
You
of
have that example of where we get to the point where we get moved further and further to the left. We get moved further and further towards tyranny because people won't stand up, and they wonder why people are getting upset with Republicans just as much as they get upset with Democrats. This is why.
Here's what we have in the Senate. We have Senator Scott Newman, who is a Republican from Hutchinson, Minnesota, who is carrying the ballot initiative for voter identification. In the House, Representative Mary Kiffmeyer, a Republican from Big Lake, who was once upon a time our Secretary of State here in the state of Minnesota. She carried the 21st century voter ID bill, the one that got passed, by the way, in the last session by both houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the governor vetoed it. What you have right now is State Senator John Howe, a Republican from Red Wing, who was also a sponsor of the 21st century voter ID bill last year, has been working with the governor and the Secretary of State, and they've been working on these electronic poll books, which is what you're talking about. Now, there was an article written in the past few days that suggested that it makes it sound like he's suggesting electronic poll books could replace a constitutional amendment. And if you are correct that there are Republicans who are so worried about being vilified by the left-wing press in this state that they would avoid voting or passing the constitutional amendment,
I'm predicting that's the reason for it.
I think you're wrong.
One could only hope. Senator Perry, good morning. You're on with Davis and Emmer.
Hey, good morning, guys. It's been a long time. I've been a little busy.
Yeah, you have been. Senator Perry, give us a little insight. Please tell me what Bob Davis is predicting is absolutely untrue. We're going to have an amendment on the proposed ballot initiative for voter identification next fall, are we not?
I believe so. If not, I would be truly disappointed. But here's what's happening right now. I know for a fact that Secretary Ritchie and his clan have been visiting as many senators of the Republican Party with their little computer laptop, trying to sell this. And what I find interesting is the fact that this technology has been out for some time. And I asked Secretary Ritchie, I said, so why now? Well, we would like to have you not move forward on the amendment.
What did I tell you?
I suggested to Secretary Ritchie, put it together. Let's bring them both forward at the same time. We'll have the amendment and we'll have the bill. And I said, and then we'll work in unison on this, and we'll see what happens to voting down the road. But truly, it's an attempt to persuade.
Why would you, may I ask you a question? Why on earth would you suggest that they bring it forward and have both bills at the same time? What is the matter with you?
Why are you saying that?
Hey, I'm still voting for the amendment. I want the amendment.
But it gives these other people cover not to vote for it. I don't understand it, honestly.
Hey, I believe we have stronger people in the Senate than you give us credit for.
Yeah, it sure worked on the budget, Senator.
Well, now you're being chippy. Now you're being chippy because I told you this is exactly the discussion, Senator Perry, that I've been having with Bob for the last half hour. I mean, I think we're going to have both, and I don't think there's anything wrong with any bill that would enhance integrity, which electronic poll books would, but you got to have a constitutional amendment to require that someone has to prove they are who they say they are before they vote.
Good luck.
Tell me, Mike, Republicans are going to pass that, are they not?
We're going to pass it, and Bob, your comments earlier, those that do not vote for that constitutional amendment, I believe they will be gone in November.
Well, I appreciate your comments. I don't mean to attack you. I just find myself being extremely frustrated with
You don't mean to attack him?
Yeah.
Well, that's what you did.
Well, of course I do. But I don't hate anyone. I just get extremely frustrated with it, and I think you understand that. I'm sure.
Let me just throw something else at it that sooner or later you guys are going to have to talk about. Why, when our governor was on Minnesota's progressive radio station this morning, why is it he never talks about the union contracts? Why is it he's not answering questions on the movement of the union contracts forward?
Well, he doesn't have to. Because, of course, no one listens to that station anyway. It doesn't matter.
Well, I happen to hear it. Anyway, we don't know. You guys need to take a look at this.
Yeah, we will.
Nothing will happen unless there's an impasse, and the citizens of this state, this great state, will feel the impact
Wait a minute.
of them not coming forward with a contract.
This is going to be my attack, Mike, because I'm going to tell you right now, not only will Republicans who don't put a ballot initiative for voter identification on the ballot for 2012 be gone, but you better pass that employee freedom legislation, because that better be there as well. And this is the problem.
Tom does not mean to attack you,
You want
Mike.
people to talk about what the governor's pushing off his table so we don't talk about unions. This is going to be the issue. If Republicans who are sent to St. Paul to get these things done get weak-kneed and soft and walk away from these tough issues, then you know what? I don't know if we're going to have an opportunity to be talking about union contracts.
We have talked about it, though. Sorry.
I know we have. But you got to tell me employee freedom is going to pass as well.
I believe it is.
Senator Mike Perry, thank you for being a good sport. We're both in a bad mood about this. Actually, what started?
Have a great day, guys.
It was the Tea Party thing, and thank you, Mike. I appreciated it. Senator Mike Perry. We'll take a quick break. Be back. We got to get a traffic update and let you know what's going on out there, and then we'll grab some calls on voter ID. You guys hang on. Davis Emmer this morning, Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130. Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130. Davis and Emmer this morning talking about the controversy concerning photo ID legislation, which has been called 21st century voter ID, something that Tom sponsored in the legislature when he was there. Mary Kiffmeyer brought it up. It was passed. The governor vetoed it. And now there's going to be a vote on to put that on the ballot as an amendment in November. And then just in the last week, they have introduced this other bill, which would computerize the voter rolls. My concern is that is going to be an excuse to vote for that and say, well, we've accomplished this computerized voter roll thing. We don't have to worry about the amendment. You know, I'm perfectly willing to be wrong about that, but I still don't understand the reason for even offering it. So that's what I'm all upset about this morning. Jamar, good morning. You're on with Davis and Emmer.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
We're good.
Jamar, I'm pretty good, but Bob's got me all heated up.
Yeah, I hear you. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, he does.
Hey, but this is a great topic. Listen, for one, I don't blame the governor for vetoing it. Because
why?
There's been maybe 6 cases of charged and convicted voter ID.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Since there's only been 6 charged, and by the way, you're wrong, you're very low. But just because there haven't been hundreds, that must mean it's not happening. No,
Tom, first of all, don't put words in my mouth. Okay?
Oh, sorry about that.
We're not going to play.
I'll back off.
Here. But here's the thing, though.
I love you, Jamar.
After I love you too. This is why I love to call and argue with you guys, especially with topics like this. Because when there's not voter fraud, when there's not prosecutions of the guys, then you can't make a big deal of it. Bob, you're jumping all over the senator here. When Bob, even here in Minnesota, what cases have been prosecuted of voter ID fraud?
Well, first of all, let me just give you a little bit of background. I have seen the voter rolls in question. I have seen this list of felons. They are working through the list. And as far as I know, it's been more than 6 that have been prosecuted. But that's not the greater picture. The greater question is, I don't know if you've seen this YouTube video of people registering to vote as Tim Tebow and other types of things. You can't, hang on a second, you cannot tell once you're inside the voting facility, those people can't tell who they're dealing with. I don't see why anyone would oppose being able to use a photo ID to vote. What's the big deal?
Here's the thing. Here's why. Because in rural and minority communities, there are older people and people my age that cannot afford IDs, and we have a system in place here. That's why you have elections.
How do they drive?
Wait a minute. You realize, Jamar, that the state will give you an ID if you cannot afford an ID. Do you have an ID?
I don't have one. The state will give you one. They want $18 for it anymore.
No.
It's free.
They have set it up so that you'll be able to get one. But here's the thing: why do you have an ID?
Absolutely.
Well, why do you have an ID?
Because you need to know who you are. It's the law.
Right. Yeah. How many people that don't have IDs, Jamar?
I know. Some of my older relatives don't have ID. Because here's why: because they're born in places like Louisiana and Texas. They're born in the early 1900s where they don't have identification.
How do they get their Social Security benefits, Jamar?
But here's the thing.
No, Jamar.
How do they get their Social Security benefits?
What do you mean? How do they get it?
How do they get their health care benefits?
Listen to me. So you're trying to make the point of if they get their Social Security, then they should have ID.
Well, no. Wait, it's not. Just slow down. All we're saying is if you have a Social Security number, then you've got to have some kind of proof of birth. So, I question it because I don't think there's that many who have that. I've heard that offered as an excuse. Well, there's going to be a lot of people. Excuse me. There's going to be a lot of people who are unable to get birth certificates, therefore they won't be able to get these IDs. Yet they have Social Security numbers. So somewhere along the line, there's a screw loose there.
Well, let me ask you a question. Some places require you to have two identifications to even get a card. So if you don't have a Social Security card to start with, how do you obtain an ID? You cannot.
Well, how do you get a car?
Again, what about a car? What do you say?
You said card. I thought you said car. I find it highly dubious that anyone would not have an identification because almost everyone has to write a check. Everyone has to use the ID to get almost anything. You use your to get into a bar. You got to have an ID, for God's sake.
Let's look at a little bit of reality again. Let's go back to reality. Okay, we live here in a state where we have a lot of great benefits. But again, I'm from the great state of Texas. My grandparents are from Louisiana. These are states where minorities are suppressed. They can't afford it. These states don't have the system that we have that will give you IDs. They don't just give them to you. Okay.
Let me put it to you this way, Jamar. To get into the double deuce, you got to have an ID.
It ain't working,
even
Jamar.
The double deuce requires ID. And I guarantee you, the guys that want to go into double deuce, they're going to show the ID. And they can't do that to vote.
Jamar, I'm going to tell you, I did this. And I can tell you from 2005 when we actually did the fiscal note, you start backing out felons and everybody else, you've got maybe a couple 100,000 people out of the 5 million and frankly about 3 million that can vote. You've got maybe a couple 100,000 that you can make an argument don't have the proper documentation. There are ways to take care of that. And for you and people like you to buy into this argument that how do they drive cars? How do they qualify?
How do they get into the double deuce?
How do they get their health care benefits? This is absolutely patently false.
All right, Jamar.
I don't like to look at this, but the reality is, guys, there is a reality where there are minorities that don't have it, guys. The minorities,
and this will give it to you for free,
and you can get one for free.
To think that it's just so easy for these minorities to go get it. If there was, there wouldn't be a voter suppression problem.
Whoa. Why is it hard? Okay, we all want to be equal citizens, right? We all have rights. Sir. We all have equal rights. Why is it easy for me to get an ID, but it's hard for them? I don't get it.
You live here in the state of Minnesota where it's very easy to obtain it. I guarantee you, tomorrow morning, I'd be happy to let you call my relative in Louisiana and ask them how hard it is for them to obtain an ID.
That's Louisiana's problem.
We're talking about Minnesota.
Jamar. Here's the thing, though, guys. Give me the number of prosecuted cases of voter fraud, okay? It's fraud everywhere.
Hey, Jamar, are you familiar with the lawsuit that was commenced yesterday against the state of Minnesota and the Secretary of State for 48,000 cases of people that can't be identified from the 2008 election? Are you familiar with the lawsuit that was just filed because it alleges that the state of Minnesota and specifically the Secretary of State did not do their job in ensuring that only people who had the right to vote did in fact vote in 2008, and they had identified almost 50,000 cases?
So it's taken 4 years for them to identify all of those people.
Oh, my God. You should be writing propaganda for the left. Jamar, I have to break. I have to break. I'm sorry. I'm going to let you go because we have to break. Hang on.
Where are the Cowboys drafting,
Senator
Jamar?
Julianne Ortman has been holding, and she's been very impatient. We're going to get to her here shortly, but let's get a traffic update. It's awful out there. We'll do that, and then we'll come back and grab some more calls. Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130, Davis and Emmer. We're going to grab all of your calls. We'll stay with it after 9 o'clock, so stick around for that. And you guys that are waiting, don't. And if you're still calling in, yes, we'll grab your calls on photo ID because lots of people, voter ID, 21st century voter ID, want to jump in after our conversation with Jamar and throughout the stuff, Senator Mike Perry and so forth. But Senator Julianne Ortman's on the line. She's been waiting patiently through all that. Good morning, Senator.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for calling.
I called about voter ID, and I think it's very reasonable to expect people to authorize themselves to avail themselves of the greatest right we have. And that's the process here of getting an ID. My son Sam has 3 of them. He's 13 years old, right? He's got the library card, the health club card, the middle school ID. That's the society we live in. And I think Tom's right that, if you can avail yourselves of Social Security benefits or Medicare benefits and authorize yourself for that, you can authorize yourself for this. And I think you're going to find that the community centers and the senior centers and folks, they're going to help people get these IDs.
Sure.
But this is our responsibility, and we will get it on the ballot. I have every confidence. But I hope to address your concern, Bob, and I hope you'll let some cool air into that room because I honestly think that Secretary of State Ritchie and the Democrats have created this new proposal as their own safety net. These Democrats are afraid to vote no on voter ID for a second time in a row and then go back to an election. And they've been opposing it. So now they're trying to find their safe vote. And if this bill advances, this is their safe alternative.
Well, why is it being offered by Republicans?
They didn't say that. They said they're working with them.
Right. This is not a Republican plan. This is Secretary of State Ritchie's plan. We'll be talking about this within our caucus.
I mean, why don't they just say no? We're not doing it.
I hope it doesn't advance.
Good.
And I will do what I can to convince folks that this is a Democrat ploy to create that safe vote for Democrats on their way to their next election. They don't want to vote no on voter ID again because that would kill them in the election. If they're 80%ers. Minnesotans expect this on the ballot now, and if they have to vote no on that, they want to say yes.
I hope you're right, Senator.
Alternative.
This is a great point, Julianne, and I got to thank you for calling in and adding to that because you're one of the leaders, not just as in name, but really you are one of the elected leaders of your caucus in the Senate. So coming from you, that's very important. One of the things, as you sat and listened to our friend Jamar who called in, they make these arguments, Democrats or those that are opposed to this type of voter integrity measure, having to prove you are who you say you are. They allege that, well, you can't get this ID, that ID. I love the way you talk about your son, Sam, with his 3 IDs, but you are also a lawyer outside of the legislature, and you are familiar, as I am, with the Georgia case. Georgia is one of those deep South states that passed photo ID a few years back. It was challenged all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and I don't think we emphasize enough, those of us who support voter ID and these election integrity measures, the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court said these arguments of people not having IDs are simply without merit. They're not real.
Well, no one even intends to disenfranchise anyone. I don't think that anyone will be disenfranchised. If they want to vote, they can authorize themselves. And if they can't, I worry about their competence to vote. And I think we're talking about folks that now get brought into election booths that maybe really shouldn't be there. And if they shouldn't be there because they can't authorize themselves, that's the way it works. I think they should be able to be confident enough to go get an ID and present themselves to vote.
Well, believe me, if they want to get into a bar, if they want to do anything, they've got some kind of ID. So thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And good luck with it. We'll see what happens. Thank you. Well, that provides a different little perspective on this planned or discussed additional bill. But I worry that what's going to happen, and again, I'll restate it, that it is essentially a flanking move by Democrats to really cleave away some Republicans to vote for that instead of the amendment bill, and we'll just have to see what happens. There, you have two different. You have my point of view, and you have Mike Perry, Senator, and of course Julianne Ortman's, who are certainly no slouches.
They're there on the front line, and I love the way she's saying it. It's also going to be leadership, because what you're worried about, it's going to take leaders like Senator Perry, Senator Ortman, to tell those that might be, in your opinion, weak-kneed, that this is not the direction you want to go. Democrats are looking for their safe haven. Don't give it to them. Make them vote on photo ID.
Right. I just think they ought to say, look, we're
voter ID.
First of all, I don't know why certain people would even bring this forward. They need to just be sat down and told no, because what it's going to do, it's going to dilute the amendment vote. This needs to go on the ballot because it will pass, and the governor won't be able to veto it. Right. We need this, and we need these things. We need to start standing up for some of these things that will help reform our governments and restore the republic. This country, again, my greatest fear is that there is no right or left in American politics. It's just all left. And what happens, why do I say that? Because people who are supposed to be Republicans, who are supposed to represent the conservative point of view, are consistently compromised over into the left side. And we're getting to the point where we're on this slippery slope where it leads to too much control of government, and then it doesn't work. And then people say, where's the man on the horse to fix it? That's the danger. It isn't just, it's socialism. The worst thing is we create too much control of the government. It has too many tentacles. And of course it doesn't work because it's the government. And it fails, and the trains don't run on time. And God forbid, everything else happens. Then you get the man on the horse that comes along that's going to fix it all. And then you get tyranny. And that's what we're headed for if we don't fix this now.
Guess what, Bob? We're going to have a little cool air in this room for the next few hours until I join you again tomorrow morning. Thanks for having me today, Bob.
Well, I thank you, Tom, for taking my call. We will take your calls after 9 o'clock, so stick around. Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130, just about 9 o'clock. Glenn Beck is next.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.